Optimal health for high performers. This is the Health Upgrade Podcast with Dr. Nawaz Habib.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Health Upgrade Podcast. This is Dr. Habib. I'm here with JP, my co-host.
Great to be here.
And we're very excited to have our special guest, Dr. Brody Miller. This episode of the Health Upgrade Podcast is brought to you by Truvaga. Have you been looking for a simple way to feel calmer, think clearer, and sleep better? Imagine achieving this with just 2 minutes a day. I'm excited to introduce you to Truvaga, a handheld device that supports your nervous system through gentle vagus nerve stimulation. As a doctor specializing in functional health and wellness, I've seen firsthand how Truvaga has accelerated healing in my clients. I've used this device to help people with a range of issues, from sleep disturbances and heart palpitations to digestive dysfunction, nervous system imbalances, and mental wellness concerns. The results have honestly been remarkable. Truvaga is designed to catalyze and accelerate the shift in your body from fight or flight to rest, digest, and recover mode, helping you manage stress, maintain mental clarity, and unwind more easily. It's not just theory. I've witnessed its positive impact on real people facing real health challenges. The best part? Truvaga fits seamlessly into your routine. No need to carve out hours for wellness. Just 2 minutes a day can make a difference. It's a small investment of time for potentially significant benefits in how you feel and function each day. If you're curious to experience Truvaga for yourself, visit truvaga.com/upgrade. You can save $30 on your device by using the code UPGRADE30 at checkout. Remember, that's truvaga.com, truvaga.com/upgrade. It might just be the first step towards a calmer, clearer you, just as it has been for many of my clients. Great to see you, Dr. Brody.
Yeah, great to be on here. I appreciate y'all having me.
We're very excited about this conversation because brain health is something that JP and I, and you as well, are very passionate about. We really understand the importance of keeping your brain functioning at the highest possible level. And unfortunately, a lot of people suffer from challenges to their brain health due to physical or other forms of trauma, right? We're dealing with traumatic brain injuries, concussion, whiplash, even minor brain injury or physical injury that can cause these symptoms to occur in other ways. And so we're very excited to have you here so we can dig into this topic with a little bit more understanding and share some of the strategies that you use in your practice with your patients to help them overcome some of these challenges. So thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
We would love to kind of get into your story. I'd love to hear a little bit about you. You've got your PhD, you're a doctor of natural medicine. Tell me about your journey. What got you kind of going into this journey and a little bit of your personal experience as well?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. So I'll take you back 12 years from this day. I was a pretty impulsive guy, as a lot of young men are throughout their 20s, making bad decisions, getting into drinking and stuff like that. And as you know, when you drink alcohol, it shuts off the prefrontal cortex from its decision-making abilities, if you have too much of it, especially. And I was outside of a nightclub 11 years ago, and I ended up getting in a fight with a bouncer outside in the middle of the street, and it didn't go well. I was knocked unconscious. Local news TV stations got it, and over 1,000 people saw it, which it went viral before virality was really a thing. And so what transpired after that is I ended up having to have brain surgery because there was a brain bleed. I was having grand mal seizures, and they removed 2.5 centimeter cavernous malformation out of my frontal lobe. But after the surgery, I was continuing to have about 3 grand mal seizures a month and put on all kinds of medications. Keppra was one of the worst that I had a violent reaction to. And things were only getting worse. My nervous system was shot. I had basically chronic neuropathy so bad that I couldn't do a push-up. But then I had an aha moment. I was learning about neuroplasticity, that the brain could change and heal itself. And that was like the catalyst for all of the things that I've done from this point in my life. And I learned about how the brain works and how it functions, different areas. And I basically am a steward, and I study it every single day because it's my passion. I had a quote unquote broken brain by the doctors, but if you understand the why and how, or if you understand the what, why, and the how of anything, including brain health, you can find systematic ways to improve it. So that's where I am today. And I help a lot of people around the world with concussions. That's my specialty, but that's my journey. And it's been a long journey, but a blessing at the same time.
Yeah, taking something that's been could have been a tragedy, was, I guess, at some level a tragedy, and turn it into something positive. That's a great positive and uplifting story. The experience that you had, did you suffer any from the surgery itself, where they removed the cavernous malformation? Was there any change in your function associated with the surgery versus the injury?
Well, that's a good question. And I probably to this day am not completely aware of what the functional changes were. But as far as the left frontal lobe in particular, my impulsiveness was already pretty high that I spoke of. My decision-making abilities were already kind of bad. But after that and after the surgery, it kind of skyrocketed to the point where I couldn't. It was like if you ever see a dog that wants its food, it's like it can't resist itself. I didn't have a filter anymore of how to people. I would say stupid things in conversations, and people would get like annoyed, rightfully so, because there was no filter anymore. But when I learned that the brain can change and heal and adapt, my filter is really good now. I mean, it's really good.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's, I'm a big believer that neuroplasticity, you see these amazing stories of people, children who are born, without sight, who adapt and find ways to still be able to effectively see by using sound or, other sort of obscure mechanisms for honing other senses. I was always amazed by the study that was conducted at MIT, where they took in utero, they took 2 ferrets, and what they did was they rewired the ferret's optic nerve and auditory nerve so that the optic nerve was growing into the auditory centers and the auditory nerve was going into the visual cortex. And you would think that, that in utero, that would just decimate the animal's ability to either see or hear. But the animals were 100% fine. I mean, 0 symptoms as a result of having basically just used those areas of the brain to decipher a different set of data. I mean, the auditory signals were going into a network that learned to decipher hearing. And even though it was structured originally to decipher visual data. And the same thing with the auditory centers. It was able to so these animals were fully capable of seeing, fully capable of hearing, fully normal in their behaviors and functions, and yet were clearly anatomically divergent from normal. So it's great to see that despite not only the injury, but the surgery, you've used the neuroplastic ability of the brain to recapture function that was, at least temporarily lost. That's a phenomenal testament to the power of the brain.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's mind-blowing, really, that there's just story after story, like you said, with that animal and in humans. And it's really happening. People discount that it happens until the day that we pass away. I mean, this is happening if we're 100. There can be pretty substantial changes until the day we pass away. And I was recently having a conversation. I'm not going to tell the whole story, but it was somebody's mom that was at 80 years old. And she started out with small finger movements like this. Within weeks, her depression was almost non-existent because they started to do other movements, not just with the wiggle, but it started with a small wiggle right here to get her some momentum.
It's great. Amazing.
That's the initiation piece. You mentioned depression, and I'd love to kind of get your take on the mental health side of things following your injury, following the surgery, and kind of your journey through recovery and rehabilitating your brain function. I imagine there were some mental health challenges along the way, or Was that something that you had to deal with?
Yeah, definitely. The mental health challenges was pretty substantial because like when you have a brain injury, it's like a deficiency essentially of a neurotransmitter, a neurochemical imbalance. And it was bad, especially combined with alcohol and drugs. And the mental health challenges were really bad to a certain extent. I was so depressed. I would look at myself. I was overweight as well. 195 pounds, like looking at myself in the mirror and really kind of hated what I see. I had suicidal ideations, but I wasn't suicidal, if that makes sense. So I had those thoughts. But there was still a part of me that knew that there was more out there. I just didn't know. I didn't know what that was and what that looked like. But as far as like mental health is concerned and brain injuries, it's huge because you're experiencing personality changes. You can't control your impulses. And it feels like it's kind of a silent epidemic, as they call it, because you can't see what's going on there unless if you have a functional MRI, which most of us are not going out and doing every single day naturally. So there's a lot of misconceptions about just because you can't see that a person is struggling doesn't mean that they're not struggling behind all of that.
For sure.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
That must have been a long journey. I mean, you said it would happen 12 years ago. Talk about the various different steps along the way. What got you started on recognizing that you could make changes to how your brain functioned? You could do things that were different. Obviously, it wasn't an overnight success. It took time. It took probably years. Along the way, what were some of the earliest signs that there were changes that were happening as a result of the steps you were taking and even missteps? Just let's dive into it.
Yeah. Now thinking back with as far as like the first signs that I got, the first sign was hope because I was watching a video with Dr. Joe Dispenza and Tom Bilyeu, and he was talking about how we have 60,000 to 70 thoughts a day, and that most of those are negative, and then basically that by changing our thinking, it has an outcome on our lives. And so that was like the basic understanding, like a light bulb moment. And it wasn't easy. You're right. Like going back, there was a time I remember I was meditating and my entire body like was convulsing. And I was thinking, this is not good. Like I can't control and my body's just randomly convulsing. Am I developing Parkinson's? That was the thought, the scary thought I had. Did I have a brain injury? Am I getting Parkinson's? But what I realized is that was the nervous system's in the brain's way of releasing stored trauma. And so once I had that realization, I started to allow myself to shake and convulse. And I had this big release when I just allowed the body to do what it was designed to do. And just as you would see like an animal, like a dog, if it experiences trauma, it'll shake that off. But sadly, as humans, we inhibit that natural response sometimes. So it was not easy. And there was a lot of scary things along the way and wondering, where is this going? Sitting in meditation chairs and like, this is doing nothing. I'm pissed off. But then like realizing, trusting in the process was huge.
I love that hope was that initial spark for you, because for a lot of people, that's what's lacking. They're lacking hope. They're lacking a route out of the suffering or the challenge that they're currently in. And so for anybody who's listening, note that there are many stories of people that have become able to overcome these challenges. And all you need to have initially in that first step is hope, and then maintain that hope with some persistent action. And we'll go through some of those specific things that people can start to do. But it's really interesting to hear that on that journey, you had these very specific kind of moments of realization. And a lot of people, you mentioned the inhibition, right? The almost conscious override that people are creating to allowing their body to enter the healings on its own, the natural way that the body heals itself. In your work with patients, what do you work to do? What do you kind of bring to their attention so that they can learn to stop consciously inhibiting that process of healing?
Yeah, it really depends on the person. But the main thing that I need to do for the patient is to teach, because if you look up doctor, docere in Latin means to teach. So the main thing I want to do is empower them with the education, a baseline of education and knowledge and understandings that they need to know. And then on the other side of that, it's practicing the skill. So when you have both the foundation of education and you're practicing a skill, then that's where true empowerment lies. So the skills like meditation, vagus nerve stimulation, another one is breath work, exercise, movement, sunlight, water, healthy foods, healthy thinking patterns. And a lot of it is breaking old patterns and replacing those energetic or chemical patterns, because when you interrupt the pattern, as they say in physics, it's like every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So if you developed a negative thinking pattern or negative habit or whatever that is, it's going to take a lot of work to rewire that behavior.
There's a lot of inertia associated with it. You're absolutely right. Just to follow on that physics analogy, that's really interesting. From a standpoint of hope, and I think that was your first step was gaining that belief that something good could happen. I'm always startled by things like, with autism, you find with a child, or, occasionally you find somebody who's actually, as a result of the quote unquote disability that they actually have this sort of remarkable talent to do something that other people can't do. And I found it very fascinating when I learned of, and you may know this person personally, even somebody who suffered a very similar incident where it was a fight or it was a mugging or something, and he was struck in the head and had a very pretty severe traumatic brain injury, and as a result of it, had a synesthesia kind of reaction where he could see mathematical patterns. That when presented with math formula, he would see the patterns. So he went back. He said he was a high school dropout, I think, and decided to go back and study math because he had suddenly gotten this ability that was sort of unique. And he had the ability to see patterns, see functions, see these things in his, just sort of appear before him. And he's now, I think he's gotten his PhD. I think he's even a professor at this point. And it's a function of the fact that he suffered this traumatic brain injury. Now, that's not to suggest that people should go out and get themselves a traumatic brain injury in order to see if they can get rid of something. But did you find anything?
There's a flashing disclaimer on the screen right now.
Yeah, exactly. Warning, don't do this. Don't try this at home. Was there anything that sort of changed for you in terms of your thinking patterns? Did you find along the way of your rehabilitation that, there were things that I couldn't do before, or things that I didn't do before that I can do now? I mean, rewiring your brain must have done some pretty remarkable things.
Yeah, totally. And I can't necessarily attribute it to the injury, but like speed reading, being able to process information going from 200 words per minute to 650 words per minute reading is a skill that I learned because I understood that you can change these things. Another thing is the ability to communicate. I'm way better than I was before because I was mumbling and bumbling my sentences before or after the injury. I was mumbling and bumbling all the time. But now, from going to Toastmasters for a year of public speaking, you're suddenly stimulating Broca's area, the ability to speak coherently and with prosody and changing your vocal just from the people you're hanging out with, like basically. So like, that's just incredible that like what we do on a moment to moment basis matters. Like the environment, it matters.
It reminds me of, so one of my good friends is Peter Staats. And Peter Staats is, I think at one point he was actually interviewed to be the Surgeon General. A phenomenal guy. And he comes from a phenomenal family. His father, Arthur Staats, in the 1950s and 1960s, did remarkably pioneering work showing that IQ was not static, that your IQ changed. He proved that by taking children and testing their IQs and then putting them into a very enriched environment. And what he found was that if 6 months of really intensive challenging their thinking, making them exposed to new thoughts and new ideas and new experiences, that their IQs changed. And so it demonstrated this flexibility, this neuroplasticity associated with cognitive function. And I'm reminded of that when you talk about the fact that you went about, healing yourself by focusing on neuroplasticity. You focused on doing, physical things and mental exercises. And then you found that you were able to go into situations like the speed reading training or into speaking, and that you probably excelled at it in part, I would imagine, because you had trained your brain how to be neuroplastic in a way that went beyond just the things that you were focusing on.
Yeah.
It made your brain more neuroplastic. It made you capable of making those changes. So it's really a two-step process. I describe it with weight loss too. First thing you have to do is get your body into a state where it can lose weight. So the first step is getting your brain into a state where it can change. And once you're there, then you are going to become better and better and better at being able to change because of the work that you put in up front. So, I'm going to ask the question but I think I know the answer, but you may tell me I'm wrong. Did you find that it was sort of like the first few steps were difficult and you were sort of inching along, and then as you sort of progressed through it, things started moving more quickly? It moved more swiftly. Is that what you experienced, or was it sort of a linear process, or was it more exponential?
I would say it's on the way that you explained it right there, the second part, that it felt like there was not a lot of momentum until there was.
Right.
I was still like lagging. I was in my meditations and still didn't feel that good. Things didn't feel quite the way that I would have liked them to. But then it just feels like after a certain pinnacle that things really took off. But like I want to allude to the fact that just people listening to this, or the three of us on this conversation, this alone is creating new neural pathways in the brain. That this conversation alone is changing who we are at a very deep level. It doesn't seem like much, but it really adds up. And just like momentum is a universal force. Once you hit that momentum, whatever area of life that is, then suddenly things really just start changing in a fast and dynamic way.
I love that you brought up Dr. Joe Dispenza was a huge part of your journey and kind of that initiation piece. You watched him on a podcast with Tom Bilyeu on Impact Theory, or whatever it was probably called at that time. And Joe Dispenza played a really big role in mine as well. It was his book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, and essentially teaching your brain that it can change and teaching your brain how to make those changes occur. And it sounds like you utilized one of his major tools in your journey, which was meditation. I'm imagining that there probably wasn't a lot of meditation happening prior to this journey or prior to that initial light bulb moment that you had. Talk a little bit about how meditation became this practice that you started to utilize, and then you started to, over time, build the momentum to make it as effective as it is for you.
Yeah, totally. When I read Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, I had light bulb moments like you. And when he explained, he demystified meditation, which was the most important thing that you could do for me at that time, because I was very skeptical. But when he said, this is what you're doing, you're building metacognition, you're strengthening your prefrontal cortex just by closing your eyes. I say it saved my life, without a doubt. The meditation saved my life, because it's something as simple as closing your eyes and removing all external stimuli or noises, things. Suddenly you have to pay attention to your own thinking patterns, because there's nothing else to do at that point. So that in itself, it's scary as crap at first. Like, you have to listen to your own voice, and often a very mean voice at first, until that's really just your monkey mind, your default mode network speaking to itself. But once you get more comfortable there, it's kind of like you're a surfer. I think of it in this way, that You have to learn how to ride the emotional waves of life. The meditation allows you to get on that surfboard and learn how to surf, essentially, all of the different things that are going to come up. And that's the beauty of it.
Very powerful. Very powerful. Along those lines, are there topics or are there things that you chose to focus on early on in that process? Oftentimes when you meditate, there's a mantra or something that you're trying to clear your mind in order to focus on. Was there something that you were attempting to focus on, or was it really just let your mind, quiet and see what comes?
A lot of it was like Dispenza has a lot of hypnotic and science-based methods to get you into trance and change that brainwave state. So I listened to it, guided meditations a lot, but I also experimented a lot with mindfulness meditation and all of the different forms and variations of meditation. Something just as simple as like looking at a candle and bringing your focus back to that. So I experimented with all of the different forms. I would say the other thing is just the daily step, like writing down and journaling your day and catching those patterns. Because when you can catch that pattern, you can change it. It's very important.
I love that you said that, because pattern identification, understanding your patterns and understanding why you're following those patterns, why those things have become habitual or almost ritualistic in your day-to-day life, and then bringing your conscious attention to it. I think that is the superpower that you've essentially unleashed into your capacity to create that change, to initiate those moments of change. And I'm always one to talk about how if you want to go on a journey, it's the exact same thing as having like a GPS, right? Like we pull out Waze or we pull out Google Maps and we put in the address that we want to go to. But until we know where we want to go, we also need to know where we start. And if we don't know where we're starting, then Google has an infinite number of opportunities or possibilities to get to that final destination. So there's no directed pattern. We don't have a direct path, the shortest possible path between where you are and where you want to go. We need to also know where we are starting out. And it sounds like that's what the initial steps of those meditative journeys for you was identifying those starting points, identifying the current patterns, the current habits, and then being able to say, okay, well, if this is what is the major trigger for why I'm doing this or why I'm acting that way or feeling this way, then let me start to shift. When I experience that same feeling, let me make a conscious decision to shift towards a different trajectory, start doing something different, build a new pattern, and that'll help me get to the destination more effectively.
Yeah. Yeah. And later on, I wish I would have understood. This is why I'm doing what I do, because I teach the people the things that I wish I would have known along on the journey. And one of the more recent understandings I've had is that the brain is holistic, that we want to heal it in a holistically way, is because it's like you would go to the gym, any gym bros out there, like you don't want to skip leg day. So it's the same thing that you do not want to skip working on different brain networks and different brain regions. So when you visualize, you're stimulating the occipital lobe. But when you're casting out affirmations, you're suddenly engaging the language center of your brain. And then you want to work the auditory cortex. So you listen to maybe some hypnotic words, stimulate all of the networks for better results. It seems so simple, but for some reason, it's not taken into consideration that you would want to work different muscles in your body. So why not do the same thing for the brain?
Yeah, I was actually going to follow up on something that Dr. Habib said about that sort of, you need to know the starting point and the destination, but the best and most effective way to get from point A to point B, in the context of traveling, it's the shortest amount of time that most people are really interested in. It's not necessarily the shortest distance. And so the path that Waze gives you or Google Maps isn't necessarily a straight line. It's a squiggly line. And, I always joke that if I taught a business class on entrepreneurship, I would put 2 points on the board and say, draw me a line that connects A and B. And then I'd put the eraser in front of the chalk each time that the student tried to go. And what you'd end up with is a very squiggly path that gets you from point A to point B, but it does it. It gets you from point A to point B. And sometimes you might be actually moving in a direction that's exactly opposite from where the target is, but it's getting you there. So there must have been points at which, there was a diminishing return associated with one tactic that you were using, and that can be frustrating emotionally. But how did you find ways, or was it just simply by, trial and error and experimentation and being willing to continue to experiment? How did you overcome those situations where you had sort of reached, I won't say a dead end, but a point where there was diminishing returns from that strategy and you needed to switch gears?
Yeah, I would say that brain injury recovery is like a puzzle that you're trying to piece together that got scattered all over the place. So it's kind of like putting one piece at a time. And the thing is I've never been scared of failure in my life. I've always had the type A personality. It wasn't that I wasn't scared of failure. It's just that I failed so many times in so many different ways that I stopped being scared of failure. Like I've hit rock bottom several times. So I think that often when it gets to coming from point A to point B, you're going to make mistakes along the way, but they don't have to be a big, horrible thing. It can be the building block for the understanding. Just as we touch fire and retract from fire, it gives us learning lessons. So you have to go out and try new things in order to get that feedback of, oh, okay, was that positive or was that crap? There's certain things that people love, like yoga. Yoga's okay, but it's not my jam. You got to find what you like and what's reinforceable. Yoga's great and I did it, but it's not my jam. What can I say?
Yeah, it's like that great line from Thomas Edison when they asked him, how long it took him to make the light bulb, and he admitted that he had tried 15,000 times, and the reporter said, "Well, what's it like to fail 15,000 times?" He said, "I didn't fail. I just found 15,000 ways not to make a light bulb." So
exactly.
What you learned is the limits of what one thing could do for you. That's not bad. That's learning something. That's still very valuable.
This is the definition of failing forward, right?
Yeah, I like it.
Exactly.
I like that experience.
Yeah, exactly. And the Thomas Edison thing is so remarkable in itself. Like, yeah, he messed up a lot, but what he discovered was amazing because of that. And I just urge everybody, no matter where you are in your life, just never compare yourself with others, just because we all do it naturally and subconsciously. Like, oh, you get on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, there's always going to be somebody doing quote unquote better than you, but you have to compare yourself with who you were yesterday. And that's the focus of how can I get better, because my life is going to get better. And over a long enough period of time, if you're doing constructive, empowering habits versus destructive, disempowering habits over a long enough time frame, that's going to add up.
That is such an important lesson. And I want to extrapolate that and maybe this is a tangent we'll only stay on for a brief period of time, but I see it in the social media world we live in right now, where, my daughters and my sons, they're looking online and they're seeing people in small snippets that suggest that those people have these fantastic lives. You see them out at a club, you see them at dinner, you see them, on the beach, and all of a sudden you end up feeling like, well, my life is nowhere near as interesting and fun as that person's life, because you only saw 15 seconds of it. And what you have to realize, and that's why I love that Nike ad from, it's got to be close to 15 years ago, where Michael Jordan is walking slowly from his car into the stadium, and he says, "I've missed 300 game-ending shots. I've missed this many free throws, this many, I've lost this many games, and that's why I succeed." You succeed because of your failures. I promise I'll shut up in a second, but one of the most important things that one of my son's basketball coaches told him was that if you are not frustrated in practice, if you are not ready almost to be driven to tears with your frustrations, then you are not learning. Okay. Learning is a painful process. Change is painful. It's like a birthing process. You have to go through it. And if you choose to only do the things that you're good at, you are not getting better. So I'm sure along the way, and I've harped on this, I'm sure along the way there came points where there were new things that you were trying for yourself that you became expert at. You became great. And that's probably the point at which you said, I got to stop doing that thing. I got to go find something I'm not good at, find something that I need to improve in order to become fully healed. And none of us are fully healed. We're all broken to some extent. Maybe we haven't been punched out by a bouncer, but, probably came pretty close in my life too. Along the way, there's mistakes that you make, and those mistakes can lead you to need to make changes, and don't get stuck. Keep that momentum going.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are a lot of takeaways there. And one of the things is, like, when you're back to the social media analogy, is you're looking at the tip of the iceberg, like 15 seconds of this person's life where there's all kinds of other experiences. We see a short snippet and our mind makes assumptions. We're assumption making creatures, but you have to catch yourself when you're generalizing, deleting, or distorting information. Those three, like generalizing, deleting, and distorting, because, like, I don't want to get super geeky with neuroscience, but like, your thalamus is preventing you. It's generalizing, deleting, and distorting information. That's okay. We all do that, but don't allow that to control what you do, or like control how you feel. Just because if I see a lot of red Jeeps out on the street, I'm going to generalize and assume that everybody has a red Jeep, but that's not the case. I'm just focusing on the red Jeep. So use those three principles and understand that's what your brain does and work with it.
Yeah, what your brain does isn't bad or good. It's just a tool that you need to understand. Generalizations are foundational to the advances we've made in physics and medicine, and it's pattern recognition. And that's really, really important. It's a sign of intelligence, but at the same time, it has an ugly side. And we know this because, generalizations are what lead to racism. Generalizations are what leads to sexism. All the bad isms come as a result of people making broad generalizations that aren't true based on small bits of data. So you always have to remain open to the fact that those generalizations may not be true. Those conclusions that you're making have to be tested at all times. That's the fundamentals of science. That's what got me so frustrated over the last 5 years, watching, people become dogmatic about things that were far from fully baked. And we needed to spend a little time to be skeptical. And we have to have an appreciation for skeptics. So, probably going a little beyond the topic of today, but, let me ask you a question, and getting back to the topic of your experiences in brain injury in general. I had a woman call me just yesterday, in fact. She's in her early 70s. She experienced a concussion, a very bad concussion. And as a result of the experience, the way she described it was that she fell in the night. She was going to the bathroom. She fell, lost her balance. And when she came to, she realized that it was a horrible thing that had happened to her, because every fiber in her nervous system was on overdrive. Like it was almost like somebody had electrified every aspect of her sensory perception. And she knew that wasn't right. And it has persisted in some pretty negative ways. And she's looking for a way to get out of that. I call it sympathetic overdrive, but that's probably only one piece of it. Did you experience that in any way? Or I'm sure some of your clients or your patients have that kind of experience. What's your take on that?
Yeah. Sympathetic, overdrive, as you experience it's kind of like what goes up must come down as well. So it's a horrible feeling, because you have the gas pedal on at the same time as the brakes. That's what people experience, is that you don't have the energy to hardly get up out of bed, but you're so anxious and sympathetically engaged, like fight or flight mode at the same time, that your heart is palpitating, it's hard to sleep, but you're like, God, I have energy depletion at times, but also at the same time, I'm so aroused that I can't seem to feel good. And so it's like a balance beam, the two systems that are working in tangent. So you have to find things that are going to help regulate your state. Like you have to force yourself at first to exercise. You have to force yourself to really practice meditation or whatever that tool is that's going to help balance your system. So if we can get you to balance your systems.
Which tools are most effective in that? Because I would imagine things like meditation are virtually impossible in a state like that, because you really can't shut things down. And in meditation, you're supposed to really try to shut everything down and focus, but you can't. It's much the same way people have with almost like PTSD, where they're trying to process through the experience that they had that's the trauma, but they're overwhelmed by the autonomic nervous system response that they can't process. What are the techniques that you suggest people do that are capable of cutting through that sympathetic overdrive, that sort of almost autonomic autopilot that they're on, that's they're struggling with?
Yeah, totally. I think that when it comes to things that are going to be naturally difficult at first, like meditation, you don't have to jump in for hours. Like just start with 2 to 3 minutes. But the things that I really find helpful are breathing exercises at first, whether we really do things like deep diaphragmatic breathing patterns to really open up things and let go of that excess stress. Breathing is always going to be the first place that I personally go to help people, to teach them not only the mechanics of how to breathe properly, but also the actual action of practicing that. Something that's overlooked as one of the best medicines that we can have. So just unwinding all of that trauma, unwinding all that had happened, untangling that. It's not an overnight process, unfortunately. It just isn't. And it can't ever be. But, like you said, Michael Jordan didn't shoot one free throw and expect to win a championship.
Right.
So
I love that you brought up the breath, because this is something that I teach every time I'm speaking. Everything that, it all comes back to breath regulation, becoming aware of the breath, and then utilizing changes to breath patterns and identifying where the diaphragm may not be working effectively. And one of the tools that I'll kind of share that I use with a lot of my clients is kind of hacking the sensory systems a little bit to enable that to occur. Because when we're in a state of this autonomic dysregulation, that exact state where you mentioned that the accelerator and the brakes are being pushed at these dysregulated, ridiculous, overdriven states, what we sometimes need is some external cue to help get us back into a regulated state. And so this is a pattern that I've taught. If anybody's heard my stuff previously, you'll know I have them put a hand on their chest and a hand on their belly. And what that does is it creates a sensory cue through the hands specifically to activate the sensory areas of the brain at the hand region, but also on the chest and on the belly. So thus bringing conscious attention to the sensory information that's coming in here. And I have people then take 3 breaths and notice which hand is moving. Is it the hand that's on their chest with the inhale, or is it the hand that's on their belly? And that initial step of becoming conscious and closing your eyes and becoming aware of that moment, those are kind of the initial stages of what meditation is trying to get people to do. But we're then adding in the sensory component, which then allows for the autonomic dysregulation to be slightly decreased or to be regulated slightly more. And that's, I think, a great tool that I utilize. I even use it with my kids, right? They won't put their hands on their chest and on their belly, but I put my hand on my kid's belly. And I say, I want you to visualize a balloon in your belly. And so I'll ask them, okay, what color is the balloon? Is there a character that you want to have on the balloon? Usually it's Elsa and it's a purple balloon. And I'll have them say, okay, I want you to blow up that balloon. I want you to feel my hand here. I want you to blow up that balloon into my hand. And what they're doing is they're visualizing, they have a sensory input, and they have conscious control over then their breathing and their diaphragmatic focus. And what that does is it overrides the autonomic dysregulation. And without fail, This is obviously a case where we're not dealing with the traumatic brain injury most of the time, but within 3 to 5 breaths, it becomes regulated again. And we get into this state where, okay, now I can consciously bring my attention back and I can have a much more controlled, much more prefrontal executive controlled conversation with you. You're not dysregulated anymore. In a case where TBI or concussion has occurred, that has just been amplified to the nth degree. And so these are tools that we need to start to utilize more and more, but just do it way more right off the bat. I think bringing attention to the breath, as you mentioned, is so important and entirely overlooked when it comes to treatment patterns that are provided by many practitioners out there.
Totally. And I love that. I love that idea of like putting your hand on those two spots, like very, very helpful. And another really cool tool is holding your breath, because when you think, I have all my patients practice this, because if you can handle extending your breath hold just a little bit longer, then that's in itself is telling your brain that you can handle almost any kind of stress. There's nothing more stressful than not being able to take a breath. So hold your breath and practice that. And your system's going to regulate itself by doing that, because your stress threshold went way over the roof. Boom, like super high. But let's bring down and help you regulate higher amounts of stress, like not being able to take a breath. Extend that a little bit longer. You're building a resilient person by doing things like that.
It's a form of hormesis. You're actually stressing the body by doing it while you're holding your breath, but then it comes rapidly back down. It's one of those great things. We talk about it a lot, where you want to be able to move into and out of that sympathetically active state fluidly. You want to be able to get back into a parasympathetic state, which is what you're talking about when you're taking those deep diaphragmatic breaths. That's getting yourself into that parasympathetic recovery mode. You want to be able to do that swiftly and easily, and there's no faster way to do that. I watch my dog. I talk about my dog all the time and how my dog can do it really well. What do I see her do is she goes from deep breathing to aggressively huffing and puffing, and then she goes and she lets out this big sigh, and then back on the ground with her tongue on the marbles, half catatonic again, looking, mimicking a rug. But what I was going to say also is we have it in our language. We talk about this a lot, that when we see somebody who's stressed out, we say to them, take a deep breath. Hey, chill out, take a deep breath. Everything's going to be okay. Why do we talk about safety? We talk about taking a deep breath. We talk about changing a temperature, chill out. Those 3 things are all really important activators of the parasympathetic nervous system. And just with respect to, not to get too geeky here, but when you're doing that deep diaphragmatic breathing, what you're actually doing is causing stretch receptors. These are literally structures that are in the lungs to stretch. And when they stretch, they, as a result of that, trigger the parasympathetic nervous system to carry information up into the brainstem that says, relax. It's basically fibers, afferent fibers going up into the brain of the vagus nerve. They're carried by the vagus nerve into the brain. So, we, not to bring this around to vagus nerve stimulation, but we typically do, is all of the things you're talking about, meditation, deep breathing, all of these things are ways to stimulate the vagus nerve. The challenge that you have is that for some people in situations where they're extremely stressed, or they're because of a trauma like a brain injury, they've been kicked into that mode of sympathetic overdrive where their nervous system feels like it's been electrified and they can't get out of it, that tools like meditation and deep breathing are insufficient. They're insufficient to get people out of it. Now, over time, working at it, it will take a lot of time. You can, to a certain extent, short circuit that or cut off the time frame it takes to do it by using vagus nerve stimulation. It's an external device. You've got one. We could talk about your experiences with it. I'd be really fascinated to hear about it. But it very rapidly does exactly what we were just talking about putting your 2 hands on your chest and abdomen and just making certain that it's your belly that's inflating that balloon and not You're not just sitting, moving air in and out of your chest. You're getting it down into the lower lobes of the lungs. Love to get your experiences and how it's going because we made certain that you got a vagus nerve stimulator to try. How's it going?
Dude, yeah, I'm really been loving it so far. So I've been taking measurements, different health measurements. So I have an Oura ring right here, and it tracks my sleep cycles. And so I've been taking screenshots every single morning on how it's affected that. And it also does HRV, all kinds of other statistics. And I'm also using a heart math device to see the changes. There's the neuroplasticity of the heart as well, emotions are malleable as well. And just like how a brain has brainwave states, the heart have basically heartwave states, essentially, that are coherent. And it's been super cool. I'll be quiet. I was really stressed like about a month and a half ago. My mind was always scattered, and I'm thinking about what do I got to do next? Even all of the tools I had, I've noticed pretty immediate changes. And my wife too, I've had her use it, and she's like, "Oh my God, I feel so relaxed so quickly. Like it happens fast. You can feel that tangible change in your system, feeling more relaxed." And I'm going to compile all of the statistics, but they have definitely improved. And from a subjective level, my stress levels have gone down a lot. So I'm super loving it so far.
Well, that's great.
That's amazing.
I'm glad to hear it, and I'm sure the people that produce the device would love to get that information too. So, look forward to connecting you with it.
In fact, I want to share. I got an email, excuse me, from one of our past guests a couple of days ago. Very well-known pediatrician, and she said, "I was having the most horrible reflex attack yesterday. I literally thought I was having a heart attack. Not really, but it felt like it. I immediately took out my Truvega, and within a minute of the treatment, the symptoms totally settled down. I love it." Isn't that amazing?
Wonderful. That's wonderful.
Just like that's from a guest. That's a doctor who lives a very stressed but very healthy life. She's very active. She's very much out there. And this is a tool that I think, JP, the word you were looking for is this is a catalyst to push us into that state more readily so that we can enter the state more readily and allow for that healing process to begin, because we cannot heal when our foot's on the gas. We cannot heal when we're in sympathetic.
And I think the point that I think is so relevant for people who are trying to recover from a TBI is not necessarily that it's only because you're in a sympathetic state that you're feeling the things that we're talking about, stress, et cetera, but the actual ability to make neuroplastic changes, the things that are really important for you to regain functions, okay, that they are just a form of healing. And you cannot heal while in that sympathetically active fight or flight state. You have to be in that state of parasympathetic recovery in order to heal. And since neuroplastic changes are a form of healing, you need to be in that parasympathetic state in order to heal. So all of the healing that happens is a function of the meditation, the relaxation techniques, the feeling of safety, the feeling of positivity associated in optimism. As you said, the very first step is having hope. When you have hope, you are feeling some level of safety. You are literally activating the vagus nerve by feeling hope. And I always, I like to talk about the fact that even back 3,000 years ago, when the Greeks were, coming up with the Aesop's fables, and Pandora's box, what was, after all of the horrible things that poured out of Pandora's box when she opened it, what was the one thing that the gods left at the bottom of that box that was able to handle, that the universe and that humanity could hold on to? Was hope. So hope really is that first step when dealing with all of the worst things that the world can throw at you.
Yeah, and I get pissed off, dude. Like I honestly get pissed off because I've been told by people that you're giving somebody quote unquote false hope. And I'm like, excuse me, sir, that's bullshit. That's fucking bullshit. Like false hope is not, you need hope to heal, period. And saying you're giving somebody false hope, that's the biggest lie that you could ever tell, that they have false hope. Come on, they need hope. Everybody needs hope. I need hope. You need hope. We all need hope.
And isn't it crazy when you say that this is false hope, you're snatching that hope away from that person.
Yep.
You're taking away the ability for them to feel hopeful. And so you're not enabling that opportunity to occur in the first place, which is so just, I think frustrating is the exact right word, and disempowering for allowing change to occur.
So I'm a huge basketball fan, and I think it's probably come across in a few episodes. I happen to be a college basketball fan, a fan of Duke basketball, Blue Devils. I hope I didn't just alienate half our audience, but somebody here can say he's a UNC fan, and I'm sure we'll get him back. But
a Tar Heel fan here, I
there you go.
You just alienated our guest.
No, that's all good. It's all good.
Took away my hope.
Exactly. But the thing that happened a few years ago was there was a game, and it was a game where Duke was down 27 points to Louisville with just over 7 minutes to go in the game. And Coach K, who was still the coach at the time, pulled his team in, called a timeout, called everybody over, and looked at everybody dead in the eye and said, "We're going to win this game. It's pretty amazing, but we're going to win this game." And he said it in a way that the kids believed. And they went out, and it literally was a switch. The game just changed. It got to the point where the Louisville players literally didn't want to have the ball. They refused to even catch the ball because they were so afraid of what was about to happen. And Duke ends up winning the game and coming back from down 27 points. And in the post-game interview, they interviewed Coach K, and he said, "I didn't believe we were going to win that game." He said, "I absolutely did not, but I figured we had to fake it. You got to fake it till you make it." And he said, "I didn't think it, but that didn't mean that I didn't need my players to think it. And so I told them that, and I said it in a way that was convincing so that they would believe it, because the only way that it could happen is if they believed it." And so
that's
my
the definition of
message
false hope, creating actual change and hope, and it works.
It's the placebo effect. It's just the placebo effect that affects everything. And placebo is critically important because the healing, I don't care what kind of medication you're on. I don't care what type of therapy you're on. I don't care what you're doing. If you don't believe that you are going to heal, then you won't. And the reason why is because the belief that you have that you're going to heal is what's actually healing you. Okay? The other things are just catalysts. As you said, Dr. Habib, they're just catalysts. If you have the catalyst there, that's great. But in order for it to function, in order for it to work, you need to believe. And even if it's quote unquote, I won't even call it false hope. If it's hope against hope, okay? It's literally hope against all odds. That doesn't mean it won't work, okay? Because you can recover from anything. And you just have to believe in it. You have to be willing to put the work in and effort, and you can make it happen.
Completely agree. Dr. Brody, I'd love you've alluded to them earlier. You kind of mentioned a few practices that you help people uncover and produce into their daily lives. And you mentioned the difference between constructive practices and habits versus deconstructive or destructive. Let's allude to, or let's talk about some of the specific practices that you recommend as kind of general recommendations to everybody who's suffering from a TBI or concussion and is ready to start making those changes. They've got their breath started. They've got the hope that they can change. What are the first few things that we add into their day-to-day practice?
Yeah, in the beginning, I'm writing a book right now and almost complete back there, Brain Rescue, where I go over my protocol, the Rebound Protocol, for step by step, brick by brick, giving people a foundation of how, in a foundational and a blueprint of how they can recover. So in the very early stages, the R, it stands for refocus. But within refocus, there's really focusing on rest and how there's different things that we can do, like resetting, getting your circadian rhythm back in its normal cycle. The E stands for exercise and movement practices that we can do that are not going to overstimulate you, but that are the kind of the right balance. And then the F stands for fuel. So fuel, giving people the proper things of what they need to fuel their billion-dollar Ferrari brain. You wouldn't fill a Ferrari with crap, with diesel fuel. So why would you do that for your the most magnificent organ in your body? And then the O stands for observe. So begin to observe yourself in the present moment. And then the S stands for supplementation, because at the beginning stage, there is a lot of deficiencies. So supplement with omega-3 fatty acids, supplement with lion's mane, with B complex, the things that you're deficient of, and a lot more zinc to really help you get that deficiency back. So that's just the very beginning stages in setting the foundation for them to move forward. And then the protocol is all going to be in the book so people can follow that in a step-by-step manner.
That's absolutely brilliant. I love how you broke it down, made it simple, made it step by step. And healing is a sequential process. You've clearly created this uniform process, and there's going to be unique individual needs and individual kind of requirements within there. Exercise is going to look different for everybody, right? Like the specific nutrients are going to look different for everybody. Specific supplements, some are general, but there's going to be specific ones for each individual. And so, not taking away from bio-individuality, there is a general process to enable the healing to occur in that linear fashion. I'm very excited to read the book and to gather more information to help more and more people, because I think this is going to be a massive positive and a huge boost for a lot of people that are suffering from traumatic brain injury, concussion, and just are looking for a journey or a path or a Sherpa, a guide to help them through that path. And that's clearly where you've positioned yourself. So
for sure,
really looking forward to that.
Yeah. Well, I deeply appreciate those kind words. Like at the end of the day, if it can help one person, then that's a net positive for society. I mean, we all can have a symbiotic relationship. We can all win. Symbiosis in biology, it's not a parasite. Like, we don't have to be parasites stealing each other's energy. We can all win in this game of life. Why not? Like, why are we gotten so far on competition and all the nonsense, fighting and bickering? We're all the same. We all want the same things, don't we?
Exactly true. In fact, I was on a news broadcast a few weeks back talking about election stress. And I said, one of the best ways to diffuse an argument with somebody who's got a different political opinion from you is just to ask them what it is, not the tactics of how they think that we're going to, but what are the goals that they have? What do they want to achieve for themselves and for their families and for their children and their friends? And you're going to find that they share the same things. And then you can say, listen, we have the same goals. Okay, we're on the same team. Okay, I can pass you the ball. You can pass me the ball. It doesn't really matter which one of us scores this time down the court. We just got to make certain we do score. What we don't want to do is have a turnover. Okay, so again, using the basketball analogy, but it doesn't matter who scores, just so long as the team wins. And if we have that attitude, then we're on the same team, and that's a parasympathetic state. Now you're with your people. You're safe. And as you said, we're all people. We're all Americans. We're all human beings. We're all on this planet Earth together. So
I'm Canadian, JP.
Now we have a problem.
And you were just down in Mexico, so we'll include the Mexicans too. I mean, like the whole of North America.
I know. I'm just North American, period. We're all residents of Earth, right? And I think that's the ultimate. We're all human. We all want...
Elon Musk can be on Mars too, so...
exactly.
We're slowly getting out to the entire galaxy. Come on, let's...
Multiplanetary species is happening.
Go Milky Way. Yeah, so...
let's go Milky Way all the way, for sure.
So listen, it's been fantastic having you. I want to make certain that in addition to everybody knowing about Brain Rescue, which is coming out sometime in the spring, early spring, is that the time?
Yeah, early spring. I'm gonna launch it on my birthday, but just for a full effect, March 1st.
Excellent.
It's going to be the final launch.
But
they will be able to get it on Kindle 8 weeks earlier than that as well. So.
Oh, great. Okay, so in the spring. But how else can they hear about you, learn about you, get in touch with you? What's all the particulars of your contacts?
Sure. just reach out to me on all social media platforms, even TikTok in these days. I mean, what's at Dr. Brody Miller. You won't find me on X, but you'll find me anywhere else, Instagram, YouTube, you name it. Or you can just send me, you can go to drbrodymiller.com, DRBRODY Miller.com, and you can reach out to me there.
Excellent. All right.
This has been such a beautiful and enlightening conversation. And it was such an honor to have you on and to hear your story. Thank you for sharing with us and with the audience and giving people hope and sharing that they can heal, that there is hope for healing from traumatic brain injury. People need to hear it. And it's been an honor for you to share and to use our platform to get it out to more people.
And likewise, it's been awesome to share this space with the two of you all. You're awesome guys, so I really appreciate you having me on. And at the end of the day, if you change your story, that internal story, you can change your life.
I love it. I don't think we can end with anything better. So
Great advice.
Thank you all for joining us on today's wonderful episode. If you got to this point, please share this with 1, 2, 3 people that you think could utilize this information to help upgrade their health and live a better life. Thank you all for joining, and we'll catch you on the next one.